Welcome to Supply Circles, stories from the innovators, disruptors and improvers in supply chain management today. Brought to you by AI Group.
Welcome back to Supply Circles. I'm James Scotland, coming to you today from Yungan country. And this is the podcast that asks the question, how can we in Australia create supply chains that are resilient and sustainable at a time when we're implementing the challenges of the 3Ds? You know them. Digitalisation to keep up with your peers in your industries and to build efficiency into your business. Decarbonisation to meet your legal requirements and targets by 2050 and in some states 2045. And diversification to build sustainability into your business by reducing the dependence on a single relationship, whether it's a product, a technology, a supply chain, or an export market. You know, one of the questions I get asked a lot recently is, how do I diversify the risks in my supply chain and my business? Where can I find new markets, new capable, competent suppliers that can work with me and get to know my business? Where can I find innovative solutions and world-leading processes? Well, my guest today says the answer is, believe it or not, North Australia. My guest is Dean Deighton, a long-time Northie and newly appointed head of North Australia for the Australian Industry Group. It's good to have him on the podcast. G'day, Dean. Welcome to Supply Circle. Just another day in paradise.
Yeah, g'day, James. Beautiful up here in lovely Townsville. I think we're sitting on, for a winter's day, about 26 degrees. So doing it tough, mate. And God's country.
Yeah, another day in paradise. Hey, I've heard you say, and other people say, that North Australia is the economic engine room of Australia, as a nice line. Is it true?
Oh, look, I think it's, undoubtedly so. As I said, I live in Townsville, but I work right across the north. And when you look at, the private and the public investment, coming in, whether it be the critical minerals sector, whether it be the mining and the resource sector itself, renewables, we can only see the defence budget where a lot of that operational spend is going to be, across the north from Darwin to Cairns to Townsville, everywhere in between. I think it's certainly, the investment cycles are driving that economic reality, what the north can bring to the rest of the country.
Yeah, let's talk about a few of those industries because I think they're worth diving into. But what do we mean by North Australia?
Oh, look, I have a bit of a running joke. Anything pretty much north of the Tropic of Capricorn, I consider North Australia. It's basically, also it's probably regional, rural, and remote Australia as well. You look at my role sees me representing the AI Group and supporting our stakeholders and members all the way from the northwest, WA, the Pilbara, up right across the NT, including Darwin, and up in the Tiwi Islands, right across to the north. The Torres Strait, Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, Gladstone, Rocky, and all places in between. So very much, it's almost that. Whilst there's no, I had this joke the other day with somebody, there's no line of demarcation per se. I look almost at Tropic of Capricorn. I consider the north of Australia.
It's a big country, isn't it? I did some work out at the Cunnington mine out near a place called Julia Creek. Julia Creek's famous because it's where the pub is from Crocodile Dundee, if anyone's old enough to remember Crocodile Dundee. But walking back from the mine site to the accommodation sector, it's about 1K and buses run, but I decided to walk back. I'm sort of walking back in mid-afternoon and there was emus bouncing along the road beside me and kangaroos out there in the paddocks. It's a different world, isn't it?
Oh, look, I've done my time at what we used to call Club Cannington myself, James, in the old days.
Have you really?
Probably still still one of the best crib rooms I think I've ever seen on a mine site.
I tell you what, you got to be there when it's raining. It is spectacular when it gets the rain because it's in the dry, like it's in the desert, it's in the arid zone. But when that stuff rains, it's just the sky's spectacular, isn't it?
And I think that red dust, that red dirt that you see out that way, and I still do a lot of driving between Townsville and Mount Isa physically in a previous role. And, you see those sunsets out near Cloncurry and how the sun sort of, reflects off the rock and everything else. It's quite spectacular. Yeah. I'm very lucky where I live.
And the big mobs of kangaroos that you see and different world. Yeah, and sunset is always the best. Sunrise and sunset, spectacular. Hey, so tell us about yourself. Are you a born Northie or did you head a bit north each year?
No, believe it or not, I was actually born at a little place called Woodside up in the Adelaide Hills, and my dad was in the army at the time, and Dad was a career soldier. So I guess my association with Australia's North started as an army brat. Dad was recycled through Townsville probably, numerous times over his career. He was infantry, so he was commanding officer of 2nd 4th Battalion, and he was also 3rd Brigade commander back in the day. And then I went on and served myself, and I was Armoured Corps. But certainly, I guess what brought me back, believe it or not, was many, many years ago we moved to Mackay, and somehow I ended up being asked by the North Queensland Cowboys to come and work for them. So that's what really probably brought me back to Townsville and the true North, as I call it, at that time. So I've been here ever since. Although I did spend about 12 months away from Townsville. I went and I worked with Adelaide United, the football club, for a while, and as a commercial manager there. But then came back north.
It's a bit of a journey around the place.
Yeah, no. Look, the North. Once it gets a hold on you, it's amazing how many people come back as they get older, and I know a lot of the younger generation have gone and done university somewhere else, but the amount of people that come back here and form their roots and raise families here, it's got a lot to offer. It's got its challenges, but it's got a heck of a lot to offer.
Before we talk about what it's got to offer, just going back to how big the place is. You're talking about top of Western Australia, which is big in mining and a whole bunch of other things. Top of Northern Territory, which is big in mining as well, but also cattle and whatever. And then North Queensland, tourism, cattle. There's a diverse range of industries up there. I think a lot of people forget how busy the place is.
Definitely, I was only in Darwin. I've been up there twice since April, and you just look at the size of the gas industry that's up there, and what's the investment that's coming in through the amount of work, the infrastructure that's being developed up there. Naturally, you've got your resources sector and your the ore sector, predominantly in the northwest, but certainly then you look at the north of Australia, and even up anything from the just from the Torres Strait down, the amount of there's mining, there's agriculture, there's you've got amazing infrastructure around the beef industry. The diversification of industry is what I think surprises a lot of people. I think people see it's this big, open, slab of land with not a lot going on. But, as I said, if I literally drive 5.5 hours west of west of Townsville towards, Cloncurry and these places, and you've got, what they're calling, ground zero of the critical minerals sector, which will support naturally minerals and key elements going into battery manufacturing that is a global industry. So, the amount of investment that's going to go into that is absolutely astronomical. So I think, we're very lucky where in a lot of ways we have such a diversified opportunity. But as I said before, we've got our challenges as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the challenges a little bit first, and then that means we can finish the podcast on a positive note. So let's get the tough stuff out of the way. Before we do, by the way, I lived in Darwin, as listeners know, for over a decade, and there was a running joke that was actually true. I've heard it said, but people would get off the plane in Darwin and say, "Where do we go to see the Rock?" Being Yulara. So, Yulara's 2,000 kilometres away. It's a big country. That's down in the dry. This is up in the tropics. Totally different environment. But people believe that. They get to North Queensland and think it's all within half an hour's drive. You go, no, it's it takes a while to get to the reef for a start.
Oh, too right, mate. I think the funniest part when people fly into towns and think there's surf, and you go, no, there's not surf, but gee, we got everything. Yeah, we've got crocodiles and everything else out there. So if you want to go surfing and try, go.
That's right. Yeah, good luck. Yeah. But the problem with the area, this is let's say that listeners would be saying that all sounds good, James and Dean. But the problem with the area is you had to work for 6 months because of the cyclones and floods and places. It just gets hammered. Why would I do business in North Queensland or North Australia?
Yeah, that's true. I think, look, cyclones are a way of life. You adjust to them. The weather patterns you adjust to. I think it's probably more, what does the North have to offer? And I think the opportunity is, the diversification of industries. We've had, as you know, we had a cyclone come through as Category 3, come through us earlier this year, which was, I think we had 4 cyclones circling at one stage, which was rather ironic because the bomb had predicted a pretty quiet cyclone season and we got an absolute doozy. But whilst the cyclone comes through, the North's very prepared for these things. The houses are built accordingly. The disaster management is top notch in terms of people understanding what you got to do. And I know there were some challenges certainly up around Mossman and towards Cooktown and other areas where they did get hit a lot harder. But certainly I think that's probably a little bit of the misnomer is don't go living in the North or working in the North because of the cyclone season. I know businesses that, probably the worst one was Yazi, and Yazi was a nasty one, but businesses just do. I think one thing I've bet in the North is the industry and the people here are resilient and they bounce back very quickly. They just get on with it. And I guess the challenge for people understanding the North is I think it's the old Cowboys theme song, up here we do things differently. Part of our history, I guess, born tough, bred proud, to stand out in the crowd. And that's what people live in. That's what we live by up here. That's what we're proud of. So cyclones challenge, yes. The weather's a challenge, yes. But it's, I look at Melbourne and being I lived in Melbourne for many years and crikey, we get 4 seasons in a day in Melbourne. So at least we know what's coming.
Yeah, you don't need a jumper or a sweater today. Being mid-June, the weather's going to be fine.
No, mate. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Because it's challenging, because there are actual physical challenges, distance and weather, it builds resilient businesses. I've always enjoyed working with business people in the North because they do have a can-do attitude. It'll be right. We'll work it out. And so if people are thinking about doing business in the North, it makes sense. You're going to come across some good business people. And I know that you know a number.
Definitely. And I think you're spot on. I think it's, let's just get on with it. I think like anything though, the North just wants to be heard. And whether that's Darwin, whether that's Karratha, Port Edtlin, Cairns, TI, they just want to be heard and have a voice and understanding, at that national level that, as you said before, it's the economic end. I consider the North the economic engine room of the country. And sometimes that's a little bit probably downplayed or not fully appreciated by people in other areas of Australia.
One of the things that people might not realise is the challenges in the past, particularly when I was living in the North, back in the noughties, was IT was a challenge. There wasn't good infrastructure in place. But since then, NBN's come in and a whole bunch of other infrastructure. And it's now got what I would consider, maybe you can confirm, world-class technology and world-class infrastructure.
Definitely. Look, there are areas, there's still patches, but then, there's patches in rural Victoria, there's patches in rural New South Wales, South Australia and everywhere else. But certainly, predominantly, the digital connectivity, the divide has narrowed significantly. I think the ability to do business in the North is real. I look at the beef sector and a lot of high tech in the beef sector now that 20 years ago you could only have ever heard of is micro tags on cattle and GPS trackers on cattle and the digital connectivity that industry now has. That's one example, certainly. But there's still gaps. But you're right, NBN and the retailers like Telstra and that they've done a pretty good job in terms of getting as much connectivity as possible. I was only talking to some regional chambers of commerce as late as yesterday, and they're saying, look, the 3G transition is being, they're being very open with NBN. NBN's being very open around what the support is for business. And probably the biggest thing has been is people will probably put on packages that were not business suited, they're more residential suited. And a lot of people now revisiting that going, well, let's go on a business package with the support of like an NBN and a Telstra, and that's making a big difference. So the connectivity has certainly improved dramatically to what it was. I must admit, where I live, when I first moved into this suburban Townsville, I was I didn't have NBN, and it's been an absolute blessing to get it and get the connectivity that I need, to do my job. So it's been good.
Yeah, because you're getting 100 Mbps and stuff, aren't you? I mean, it's as fast as anywhere else in the country. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. That was the tyranny of distance. The tyranny of distance was that you just couldn't communicate with the North very easily, but not now.
Very much so. Like, I'd be on that road on the Flinders Highway, I used to work out when I had to do my phone calls. I knew that once I got past Hughenden, I was in a black spot till probably, Cloncurry. But now you've got service the whole way, So, that's a, when you've got, mining vehicles and heavy haulers on that road day in, 24/7, that's a big support of that economic environment out there.
Yeah, one of my major clients was Ranger Mine out in the Kakadu National Park, right in the middle of the national park, and so I'd say to my assistant, I'm heading out to Ranger, and I'll be off the air for about 3 hours, and and she'll say, "Oh, that's terrible," and I'd sort of try and not smile and say, "Yeah, it's going to be terrible. I'm just going to spend my workday driving through Kakadu National Park without any phones." It was terrible.
That's probably a blessing in disguise these days. But in a past life, I used to work in the fuel sector, and I used to have to actually log a call and say, "Look, I'm now coming up to Hughenden for the next 2 or 3 hours. You won't get me," and just so they knew as part of their their management process where I was.
But now it's covered by satellite, so the area is pretty well
100%.
Yeah, you mentioned the beef industry. I wouldn't mind going a bit further on that. So the cattle producers know where all their beasts are at all time because of the RFID or GPS, or what are they using? How does that work?
A lot of them have got the RFID tags on the cattle, so GPS track them. They've even got there's stations that have the cattle, they might muster them, and the cattle have reach a certain point. The gates open automatically through sensors. The gates close automatically through sensors, depending on how much cattle they want to let into a certain part of the property or whatever it may be. But certainly, there's still the old school of herding with the choppers and all that sort of stuff, but and the vehicles. But the technology that is out there is world class. A lot of it has been developed with the likes of James Cook University and Professor Ian Atkinson and these sort of guys to have these RFID tags really working well with the cattle. So it's quite amazing to see.
Coming a resilient region that's come up with quite a lot of innovations, and it's certainly in favour of the RFID. I think stands for radio frequency ID. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. James.
Yeah. You started mentioning before about critical minerals. Being in North Australia. Yeah. Critical minerals are, well, I'm sure everyone listening knows this, critical minerals are minerals listed that are critical to build the future we need. So it changes all the time. I've said before, critical minerals used to be the minerals needed to build washing machines and dryers back in the 50s. It's where they first came up with critical minerals. Now we talk about things like what's needed for our electric vehicles, what's needed for our missiles, whatever. And are you saying that there's a lot in North Australia?
Look, I will claim I'm not a mineralogist, so I won't go into technical terms. But
another word though, mineralogist.
Yeah, but certainly I've had a fair bit to do with the Critical Minerals Office from the Queensland government, believe it or not. But certainly, you look at vanadium, lithium, and some of the key elements that need to go into, as you said, whether it be missile technology for defence, whether it be to go into a lithium battery, whatever it may be. Simple things. And I know I'm probably referring to Cloncurry and the northwest quite a bit, but some of the highest level and deepest. What I mean deep is the widest trench of vanadium in the world, and the highest quality vanadium in the world, literally sitting just below the surface. So that's a lot of people don't quite realise that. So. Little Cloncurry in the middle of, out past Julia Creek and all the rest of it, is quite, it's part of a global supply chain, and the investment that is already attracting and will attract, So there's been figures mooted depending on who you talk to, is just the critical minerals sector out in that northwest alone is probably worth close to $500 billion over its lifetime. Wow. So we're talking a massive, massive industry development.
Yeah. And that means that there is supply chain opportunities for people listening to this. What you're saying is that there's whole industries being developed. Is that right? Definitely.
You've got a battery, just along the eastern seaboard. You've got, depending on whether you've got a hydrogen sector developing, a renewables sector. You've got the likes of an actual battery manufacturing industry being developed out of North Queensland alone for, predominantly for export need. So there's new and emerging industries that we've never seen before historically. Your traditional mining and resource sectors are there, but certainly the new critical mineral sector will service the new economy. And I think, based on the federal budget that came out in May, the focus on the renewable sector and the critical minerals sector, the north of Australia will be the ones servicing that sector. And I think a lot of people, may not quite understand that, the opportunity that exists to service that investment.
Wow. We were talking about the things that are the challenges for North Queensland, and I've just jotted down some of the opportunities. We'll come back to talk to them. But the biggest challenge for everyone in Australia is staff and staff, skilled staff, getting the right staff and the right skilled staff. I imagine talking fair income, Dean, that's got to be a problem up where you are.
James, it's probably number one. Yes, the cost of doing business isn't decreasing, and we know about energy costs and all the other things, and no one's diminishing that. But the ability to attract skilled staff, the challenge to retain them, is probably the number one challenge that we are seeing and hearing from industry on a daily basis, and that's all the way from the tier one organisations right back to SMEs in regional centres. And that's all the way from the northwest, the Pilbara, all the way across to Darwin, Tennant, and Alice Springs, and all the rest of it, and all the way across to northern and western Queensland. The biggest challenge is getting people and holding on to people, because historically, people may come into the regions and like it or love it, the mining sector pays at a premium. And can afford and has been able to afford to do so. So then you're finding, you're losing from these regional centres, you're losing people with some trade knowledge or some advanced skills or some higher educational skills. But on top of that, it's also getting people to understand the opportunity that exists in the north. That's where I look at it from a positive sense. Is workforce is not going to go away as an overnight challenge. But the ability for people to understand the opportunities that are there, and even though I live and breathe in Townsville, I've got 4 grandsons. I've got a grandson who wants to be an astrophysicist. And I'm going, well, you don't have to leave the north to do that. And he goes, why, Pop? Because at Bowen we've got a spaceport being built, for goodness sake. That Gilmore Space will be putting low Earth satellites into space out of Bowen. So there's so many opportunities to stay in the north. But the workforce is certainly the number one challenge.
Out of Bowen?
Bowen, mate, yes.
Just because it's in the right part of the world, I would imagine. It's got something to do with where the space thing is.
Weather patterns and now it was technically given, the information was technically advised to me at one stage, and I'm no astrophysicist by any means. But
what the hell are you then? If you're not a meteorologist or an astrophysicist, what are you doing?
I'm just a generalist, mate, who makes a way through the day. But certainly, it's got something to do with its distance to the equator and how that works in terms. But you're right, it is the weather patterns as well, but the distance to the equator.
Yeah, it's this thing that people don't realise about the north is that it's got a whole bunch of natural traits that just constantly surprise you, including the right space, right part for space, etc. Yeah. But back to the skills and trade days, you mentioned James Cook and things. Is there enough across the whole of North Australia? Is there enough infrastructure in place for people to have a good life? I mean, it's okay if you live in Townsville probably, but is there schools and is there universities and is there opportunities and
Oh, look, certainly you've got, a fantastic institution in Charles Darwin University, which is a dual sector. So it's also a vet. It's also basically it's also, NT TAFE at the same time. In Queensland, you've got the likes of, JCU and CQU out of Rockhampton. So I don't think that there's a shortage of actual universities and facilities per se. I think probably what we're seeing is there will be a need for critical infrastructure to support population growth and what's needed in a workforce to support a lot of these projects. And look, depending on which number you look to, some people are saying that, the renewable sector alone needs 27,500 workers in the next 5 years. You've got likes of the copper string, the massive energy project, which is the link between Townsville and Mount Isa. It's been up in the territory a couple of times since April. You look at what their workforce force is needed for the gas sector and just the resources sector, and also the huge renewables projects that are pending. And you got solar farms. This is what we talk about economy of scale. You got solar farms potentially being and renewables projects potentially being built, say in the NT, the size of Tasmania, each of those projects. And you look at that and you go, and you need people to build them. And this is going to be the challenge: is the infrastructure is, how do you house people? How do you look after them? How do you give them their basic needs? So these are probably the bigger challenges to support the workforce growth and sustainability across the north.
Yeah, that nicely sets it up, because there is opportunities emerging every day that are massive, building whole industries in the north. There's some great natural abilities that will be used as we move into a new world. But there are challenges. So interesting chat. We'll go to a break and come back and talk a bit more about that. This is a supply chain type of podcast. You mentioned that you work for North Queensland Cowboys.
Yeah.
When I think about professional sport, is they're like supply chains. They're always looking for maximum efficiency, for high performance, for how to get the best out of what you got available. In their case, they're talking about human bodies. In supply chains, we're talking about systems and processes. What did you learn working for a high-performance organisation?
That's a really good question, James. It was interesting because I'd come into professional rugby league with no real knowledge of professional rugby league, believe it or not. Growing up, being born in South Australia, spending my formative years being moved around with the army, but I'd played AFL. I was an AFL nut, still am, believe it or not. So sort of, it was a great opportunity in a lot of ways, because at that stage, I'd come in, the brand had only been, the Cowboys were only established in 95. I came in, in 2000. One thing I learned was exactly what you said, is regardless of the sport environment, I think this can translate to a business environment, the commitment to excellence by everybody at every level of the club. Now, I know in those days the Cowboys struggled. They were a fledgling club in a lot of ways. And since then, those who have been through the system with the Cowboys, none of us could have been happier when 2015 when they won the premiership. I can tell you that, because a lot of the building blocks were put into place 10, 15 years before that. But the commitment to excellence, and that was all the way from the front office all the way through to the football department, the strength and conditioning coaches, myself as a sponsorship manager, the servicing of the corporate arrangements we had with sponsors. Everybody played a part of that jigsaw. And if one of those parts failed, then the club as a collective failed. So that was probably what I learned, was you're only as good as your weakest link. And if you strive to excellence and you build a culture of excellence, excellence will eventually, it happens. It comes. It comes through damn hard work. Don't get me wrong. I saw how hard those guys worked. And, and some of them were we had some footballers who were not superstars by any means. This was the pre-Jonathan Thurston days. But I saw the young, in fact, Matty Bowen has been a very long friend. Matty Bowen's still my next door neighbour, believe it or not. And I remember when Matty started, and look at the superstar he became in the game, but I saw the work ethic that he had and others had. I still see the work ethic when he's in his home gym, and he puts me to shame when he runs my grandsons through a little bit of a fitness thing next door. But I guess the commitment to excellence is something I took away from that. I think it's very important to have.
Yeah, I did a little bit of study in the area. I didn't do much work, but a bit of study. And what comes through in all of the research is that if you're going to have a high-performance team, everyone in the whole place, every single human being in the place has to be directly aligned to what you're trying to achieve. There is no doubts at all that the reason that you are here, Dean, is because you're contributing to what our goal is in this way. And there's this real clear communication. Everyone knows how they fit. And I think if every business should use that. The Williams Formula One racing team, Frank Williams, had as his sole goal was that they built very fast cars. And people said, I would have thought that winning the Formula One championship was your goal. And he said, no, that's just the measurement. The goal is to build a very fast car. And everyone knew what they were doing. If they lost the Formula One that year, doesn't matter. Our cars just aren't fast enough. And there's that clarity of thought, isn't it? It's just amazing how we can learn from that. Yeah.
Definitely. I think one of the most powerful things I learned was the ability to hold others within that culture, that journey for excellence, that culture accountable.
Okay.
Myself, I wasn't the guy taking the hits on the football field. I wasn't the guy, taking the ball out of fullback. That was the Matty Bowens and the Matt Sings at the time and the Nathan Fiends and those guys, the John Buttigiegs and the John Doyles, who are still all great mates. But at the same time, if on the field, they're having a tough night and for some reason a sponsor's, a message doesn't go up on the big screen or poor food in the corporate box, or it all comes to, and I know that sounds very flippant, but it's all part of a machine that has to come together, both at a game level, pre-game level, post-game level, 24/7. Now, the running joke was, people used to say to me, when footy season ended, you can have a holiday now. I said, no, that's when our real work starts from a corporate side, because the players do their bit, and then the machine keeps going. So, but you're right, it's about it's as you said, the game days were our measurement, but everything else was part of that.
It's a good lesson for every business, I think. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back.
The largest Australian workplace changes in over a decade
Underpaying workers could result in crippling fines.
There'll be new rules about when a casual employee has the right
employees will have the right
to disconnect.
Workplace laws are changing. Pay attention or pay the price. Safeguard your business with Australian Industry Group. The legal experts at Australian Industry Group will help you navigate the new legislation and prepare your business for the changes. Become a member today at aigroup.com.au.
I'm talking to Dean Deighton about North Queensland and, actually the whole of North Australia. I shouldn't say North Queensland. Before the break, we were talking about high performance. And part of being a high-performance organisation is resilience. I said earlier in this podcast that the North Australia part, by nature, resilient because they have to be. Can you talk to that for a few minutes? What makes them so innovative? What makes them so resilient?
Look, I think business across the north of Australia, resilience, it's interesting because, they're proud to operate in the north of Australia. I think, the tyranny of distance, sometimes extended supply chains. You look at just trying to get material into, say, Darwin, and you don't know this only too well, James, how far things have to travel either by road, rail, or even sea. The same in, northwest, and the same in North Queensland. But certainly I think what they do bring is, let's just get it done, and a way of getting it done. And they like to partner with like-minded industries or like-minded businesses. They like to partner with like-minded individuals who can see their way forward. You've got, the Northern Territory Manufacturing Council, which is a group of businesses that have come together, all like-minded, going, what can we do better in the territory collectively? And one thing I find is probably a little bit different. Whilst they may compete commercially and economically, a lot of businesses will actually collaborate very heavily across the north. Some may have some advanced tech that, have you thought of this? Can you use this? I've seen some amazing technological developments just come out of purely by, through the sugar industry, through the beef industry, as we spoke about earlier. There's a group up here, the north called Rockfield Engineering, who developed a flood monitor sensor called Lixia that is just amazing. It's cheap, it's deployable, and it's globally, some of the best tech you'll see. And that's come out of research with JCU and, some university students and an engineering group coming together. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a real push. We're not, those of us in the north, we're not just, how do I say this? We don't just sit on the beach and sun ourselves and go, oh, it's lovely up here today and we'll wait for the next cyclone. We adjust to conditions. We adjust to economic reality. Yes, we've got challenges in the workforce and all the rest of it, but the north will always find a solution. That's what I found. They'll always find a solution to something. And I think it's a really positive way of looking at things in a positive way. And they want to do business with people who also want to positively have a go. And I know it sounds very holistic, but it's the reality of the north. We're just like, okay, we've got challenges, let's just get it done. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, so if you're looking for people to do business with, either supply or as clients, that you might have a look at North Queensland because of this attitude of, or North Australia, because of this attitude of let's get it done, let's find a solution. Let's talk about some of those industries. Now, you mentioned hydrogen a while ago. What's going on with hydrogen?
Oh, look, hydrogen, I can probably talk more from hydrogen from a Queensland perspective because I was in the Queensland government for a period of time and I was the director of the manufacturing hub programs. You've got, hydrogen is at the moment is a very, I guess, a fledgling industry, for want of a better term. But I think, the federal government's budget announcements in May certainly have put it, front and centre. The Queensland government have it, very front and centre of their development. You've got hydrogen hubs being developed in Gladstone and the likes of Townsville. You've got common user facilities in all of those ports. So, hydrogen very much is part of that green energy future. You look at what Sun Metals is doing with their own homegrown arc energy, and they're going to be running hydrogen trucks back and forth from the Sun Metals refinery to the port, to reduce emissions. They're going to be doing that in conjunction with some local manufacturers and RGM maintenance and a few other people. So that hydrogen supply chain starts to get some momentum and really build. And then, over time, I know the intention is to certainly have, a commercial volume of hydrogen able to be exported. But certainly, I think if anything, even just to reduce some of the emissions and hit some of the renewables targets, hydrogen is a critical part of that mix that's going forward.
Yeah, so have a look at the hydrogen industry. There might be some opportunities there for people listening in. The other one is traditional mining, traditional LNG. Now, I'm not sure where LNG is sitting at the moment. We wander between number 1 and number 2 export in the world. But you don't see much of it if you're wandering around the cities of Australia, but you have to go to North Queensland and in particular North WA, where offshore there is massive LNG facilities. That's going to continue for a while, I understand, Dean.
Oh, definitely. You look at, as I said, with the LNG industry is going nowhere at that space because it is, it's there, it's established. You're right. Our export volume is incredible. Even being up in, as I said, Darwin and seeing the infrastructure being built to support the gas sector and the exploration sector up there is just astronomical. And it's, and I'm not. This is an environmental discussion, but you go into you talk to anyone in the territory, and fracking is not a dirty word, but it is it's part of the industry reality of what the NT is developing, and I know they're being supported to do so. So you're right, the LNG sector is enormous, and I think I remember the days of the old Bechtel down in Gladstone and seeing the trains being developed and all the rest of it, and when I'm talking trains, as you know, James, for our listeners, trains are not physically on the rail. They're what's called they're basically a big refrigerator that cools and liquefies the gas, but you see the size of what's happening there over at Curtis Island and Gladstone, what's happening up in Darwin. It's a sector that is enormous and critical as well.
There's also traditional mining as well, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you've got the Bowen Basin. You've got you've got everywhere from your traditional ore in the northwest to your black coal in the middle of the central Queensland, and everywhere, and all minerals and types in between. So the mining sector, I know that we are transitioning. From a globe, the globe is transitioning, and in some sectors, mining's a dirty word, but we probably have, in my experience, some of the cleanest mining practices in the world, and also a lot of the miners that that I know of and that we work with, they are very considerate of the environmental side of what they do, and in fact, a lot of them are probably ironically some of the first to embrace the renewables journey to support their own operations. So I think as much as and I'm not pleased, this is not an environmental discussion, but certainly I think people probably underestimate how important mining is to the economic backbone of this country.
Yeah, there's a mine in northwest WA that for many years has been importing 2 road trains a day of diesel to run their machines. And a while ago, they said, why are we doing that? Why don't we just build a solar farm and run it off the solar? Two things happen. They don't have to run the trucks every day because they've now got power from the sun. And secondly, they're not subject to the world prices. They know how much their fuel's going to be because they can do it. Now, they can't do all of it with renewable energy, but this is a hard rock mining operation is using mainly renewable energy to get it. And if anyone types in Pilbara into renewable energy into your search engine, you'll be staggered by the size of the wind and sun farms or solar farms that are up there. It's a pretty innovative. Tell me about the tourism. Is tourism dead and buried up in the north?
No. Certainly, we're very lucky, I guess, on my side of the country, we've got this fantastic thing called the Great Barrier Reef, and, literally, 20 minutes to the reef, 20 minutes to the rainforest, and an hour to the outback, literally from where I sit right now. So very, very fortunate in that regards. You got Cairns and what they're doing, and, right up to Cape Tribulation, and no, they've done it tough economically. Probably the tourism sector you mentioned earlier in our chat, the weather. From a Queensland perspective, the weather probably affected the tourism more than anybody else. But jeepers, as I said, I've flown in and out of Darwin numerous times recently, and every single plane's full, and they're not all wearing fluoro. There's a lot of people going there to work, but there's a lot of tourism going through there as well. So you mentioned it before, the Kakadoos of the world and these sort of places are still doing very well. But I think if I encourage anybody who hasn't been to the north is get on a plane or get in a caravan or get in a motorhome and come up and do the run through North Queensland, across into the Territory, see what this amazing country has to offer. You've lived in the NT, James, so you know how beautiful that is. And there are sights and sounds that is the best in the world. I've travelled all over the world, and I tell you, you can't beat home sometimes. And the north of Australia is some of the most spectacular country you will ever see. So, and I know the tourism operators, they always would like, they want an increase in domestic tourism. I know that from internationally, the Chinese are very popular visitors. I know the Japanese are very popular visitors, and New Zealanders. But certainly, grow that domestic tourism and come up and have a look. We'll look after you.
You've done the ad well. I know that when I was running business in Northern Territory, getting staff was always a challenge. The way that we did it and the way that the NT government did it was sell the lifestyle. Come and just come and have a look, because it's pretty spectacular on the good days. The bad days can be a bit challenging, but the good days are mind-bogglingly beautiful. Yeah, it's been a good chat. How do people find out? How do people find out about North Queensland? We've said that there is opportunities aplenty. You can find good suppliers up there, or you can find good buyers, or you can just maybe find some joint ventures to start doing some work in these whole new industries. How should people find out about what's going on in Cube?
Well, they can certainly.
Or North. We'll start with Cube and then talk about the whole of North.
Yeah, certainly. As the head of Northern Australia, my role, and I take it very serious, to advocate for the North. So, people can get in contact with me directly. I can put them in touch with enterprise groups such as Townsville Enterprise Limited, Advanced Cairns, the NT Chamber and others. But certainly we can support in a lot of ways with some of that supply chain support. But certainly, any questions, yell out. More than happy to. We've got an amazing group. We're the Australian Industry Group ourselves, but an amazing group of stakeholders that, tie into us as well. And I think, one thing, even in the time I've been in this role, is we are really starting to be taken seriously as a voice for the North. So, and that's my role.
Yeah, another good ad. Good on you, mate. That's very good. Grandkids like living there?
Oh, I love it. They love the fact that, they're all sports mad. So it's rugby league central, and I've got one playing Aussie rules, thank goodness, but he plays Aussie rules on a Saturday morning, and an hour later he's running around a rugby league field. But so be it.
Lifestyle.
But look, it is a great lifestyle. It's contrary to some of the I guess the push around some of the crime issues. Crime's everywhere, but it's a fantastic environment to raise families. I've come back to live in North Queensland. I'm so happy I did, and my daughters and are raising sons who hopefully will stay here as well. and be part of the next generation and work and live and grow their families in the North.
Yeah, fair enough. Is there still developing North Australia? Is that still a federal government policy, or is it changed there?
Yeah, it's still going. And in fact, in a month or so, I'm off to the Developing North Australia Conference over in Karratha, with lovely Karratha, which you'd know. So heading off there. So developing North Australia is still a policy framework. We talk regularly to the likes of the Regional Australia Institute and Madeline King and these sort of things, but certainly it's still very much it's high profile. And for those who don't know, Developing North Australia, the conference itself is all around what are the next steps? How can we all work collectively? I guess it's a really good getting together of everybody really collectively on the same mission, going, what do we need to do to keep North Australia, take it to the next level? So I'm really looking forward to that conference in August, as it was a great conference last year as well.
Maybe I should have spoken to you after that. That has been a good chat. Thank you very much, Dean.
Thanks, James. Appreciate the time, mate.
You go back to sitting on the beach and enjoying life in North Queensland. Oh,
yeah, just got to keep well out for the crocs, mate. That's all. That's why I got a backyard pool.
you know the old joke about how you don't have to outrun. If you and I are on the banks and there's a crocodile arrives, I don't have to outrun the crocodile. I just have to outrun you.
Outrun me. Yeah.
That's where you take your mother-in-law when you go fishing and so on.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, mate.
Well, that's it for another episode of Supplier Circles. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and thanks for your feedback. If you have any feedback on today's interview with Dean or ideas for the show, or you just want to give me some feedback, hit me up at james.scotland@argroup.com.au or head over to my LinkedIn page. I'd love to hear from you. We'll put some notes in the show notes about how to understand developing North Queensland. And we'll be back in a fortnight with more business improvement insights into the keys to building sustainable supply chains. Thanks for joining me. This is Supply Circles. I'm James Scotland. Bye for now.